Well guys, WrestleMania 37 is now officially over and done with, and by all means this year's Showcase of the Immortals was truly a special and intriguing show, filled with lots of cool and big moments, with arguably the biggest aspect being the fact that for the first time in over one full calendar year, the show was broadcasted in front of a live audience of fans, which is something that is truly an underrated aspect of WWE, as the fans made the atmosphere for the matches so much better compared to when WWE have their shows in the Thunderdome with a virtual audience. Before we get into the recap of Day 2 of WrestleMania 37, as well as the big story surrounding the second day of WrestleMania, we definitely have to go over some of the big matches from Day 1 of WrestleMania 37 for the fans who perhaps missed out on Mania yesterday, as well as all of the big news and rumors about the big Day 1 or WrestleMania 37 matches and outcomes. We firstly need to briefly talk about the fantastic WrestleMania 37 main event of Day 1, which was the fantastic SmackDown Women's Championship match between the defending champion Sasha Banks and challenger Bianca Belair. The match itself between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair was absolutely great, with lots of emotion in it. And after giving fans a truly awesome main event, when it was all said and done, Bianca Belair achieved her biggest accomplishment thus far in her WWE career by pinning Sasha Banks to win her first ever SmackDown Women's title, much to the delight of the fans in attendance for WrestleMania 37. The match was great and the result was even better, as the ever-capable Bianca Belair will now be leading SmackDown's women's division moving forward in 2021, and it was easy to tell that this moment meant so much for Belair, and it was well deserved. One of our sources has mentioned that Vince McMahon was extremely happy with the Sasha Banks vs Bianca Belair match, and feels Bianca can become a massive star for WWE after her crowning moment last night on Day 1 of WrestleMania 37. Another big highlight of Day 1 of WrestleMania 37 was the exciting and great matchup between Cesaro and Seth Rollins, and there's no doubt that WrestleMania 37 marked the crowning moment of Cesaro's career in WWE, with Cesaro picking up the huge win over Seth Rollins after a back and forth superb match with both Seth Rollins and Cesaro putting on great performances. A new backstage rumor has leaked that WWE are planning a big push for Cesaro on SmackDown after his big win last night at WrestleMania 37, with a Universal Championship opportunity and apparent guarantee for the Swiss Superman in the coming months. One last thing we need to mention before we get into Day 2 of WrestleMania 37 is the performance that Bad Bunny put on alongside Damian Priest against The Miz and John Morrison. By all accounts, Bad Bunny exceeded most fans' expectations for his performance at WrestleMania, and in all honesty, Bad Bunny's destroyer on John Morrison outside the ring was actually amazing, and he deserves a lot of credit for giving it his all in this match. The main card of Day 2 of WrestleMania 37 kicked off with a highly anticipated match between The Fiend Bray Wyatt and Randy Orton, and shockingly enough, the new Fiend Bray Wyatt that had returned to WWE at Fastlane 2021 transformed into his original form, and by all means the entrance of The Fiend was probably the best thing regarding this entire match against Randy Orton, because when it was all said and done, after a short and uneventful match, and Alexa Bliss seemingly distracting The Fiend, Randy Orton defeated The Fiend after a swift RKO, with The Fiend then staring down Alexa Bliss who had cost him the match, and by all means this was certainly a very bizarre ending. According to one of our sources, Bray Wyatt was extremely angry and downright furious behind the scenes after his match against Randy Orton, with Bray Wyatt being angry at the way WWE booked his match against Randy Orton, and also does not apparently like the storyline of Alexa Bliss turning on him whatsoever at this point, and by all means it will definitely be interesting to see how things play out in the coming weeks. We then had the women's tag team title match between Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax against challengers Natalya and Tamina, and by all means this was a pretty solid match, with Shayna and Nia retaining their women's tag team championships. Next up, we had the singles match between Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, with YouTuber Logan Paul acting as Sami Zayn's WrestleMania guest at ringside, with Kevin Owens eventually picking up the win over Sami Zayn, and the highlight here was definitely Kevin Owens delivering a stunner to Logan Paul, who surprisingly sold the stunner extremely well. We then had the United States Championship match between defending champion Riddle against challenger Sheamus, and there's no doubt that this was a fantastic and hard-hitting match between the two superstars, and Sheamus delivered an equally devastating and amazing mid-air brogue kick to pin Riddle to win the United States Championship. Next up, we had the Intercontinental Championship match between Big E and Apollo Crews, and it cannot be denied that this match ended with a pretty big upset, with Apollo defeating Big E to win the Intercontinental title, with the help of a mysterious monstrous big man, who some of you may know him as Dabba Kato from Raw Underground. We then had the Raw Women's Championship match between the defending champion Asuka against challenger Rhea Ripley in the co-main event of WrestleMania Sunday. The match itself between Rhea Ripley and Asuka was definitely solid, although perhaps not quite as great as the SmackDown Women's Championship match from day one of WrestleMania 37 between Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair. But nonetheless, Asuka vs Rhea Ripley was still more than decent, and the match result is something that many fans are very happy about, as Rhea Ripley managed to defeat Asuka to win her first ever Raw Women's title. Rhea Ripley is certainly a women's division superstar with a lot of potential, and she has now officially become the face of Raw's women's division moving forward, which is refreshing to see. We then come to the main event of Day 2 of WrestleMania 37, and this is where a lot of the controversy surrounds itself when it comes to tonight's WrestleMania event, as we had the scheduled Universal Championship triple threat match between the defending champion Roman Reigns against the two worthy challengers Daniel Bryan and Edge. Without question, heading into this match, most fans were adamant that either Edge or Daniel Bryan would be walking out of WrestleMania 37 the new Universal Champion, and closing out the Showcase of the Immortals this year on a high note with a new champion on SmackDown, but that shockingly never happened. The match itself between Edge, Daniel Bryan, and Roman Reigns was quite great, and loaded with action and hard-hitting moves, but it was the match's ending that caused a lot of fans to get rather upset or angered, because when it was all said and done, Roman Reigns shockingly retained his Universal Championship tonight at WrestleMania 37 by pinning both Edge and Daniel Bryan at the very same time. The match finish has caused many wrestling fans to get very upset, with a general consensus being that firstly, Roman Reigns should not have retained his Universal title, and either Daniel Bryan or Edge should have won the title instead, or if WWE were to have booked Roman Reigns to retain, they could have done it in a much better way, with many feeling like the great triple threat match itself was overshadowed by the poor ending. One of our sources has mentioned that the main reason for Roman Reigns retaining his Universal Championship tonight at WrestleMania 37 is because WWE planned for Big E to be the man to dethrone Reigns of the Universal title in the coming months, and felt that neither Edge or Daniel Bryan really needed the title tonight.